Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match review, the first of the new Premier League season. Sunderland 3, West Ham 0. Not much to smile about really, is there, Mike, today when we go through this? There's not an awful lot of positivity to take. And yeah, a 10-hour round trip for me yesterday was not the best way to spend my Saturday after what we watched at the stadium alike. But before we even talk about West Ham, absolutely fair play to Sunderland, deserved the 3 points. They'll be absolutely buzzing with their return to the Premier League as well. And I'm just going to go on record and say you will not have an easier Premier League game than that. So please don't expect that to be the norm going forwards because it isn't. And yeah, it was a very easy 3 points in the end for Sunderland. But yeah, credit to you where it's due. Definitely deserved the 3 points. And we were absolutely horrific, which we will get into shortly. But yeah, welcome back to the new season. If you like the content, make sure to like, subscribe, all of that jazz. And yeah, but we're going to kind of break down the match as we go, Mike. But to start with, let's just take a little bit of a look at the lineups and how we proceeded with our first lineup for the first game of the season. So Hermansen actually came in goal for his debut for West Ham. Quite a surprising pick from Graham Potter to put him straight in. The back three of Todibo, Kilman, Aged, which I think was quite expected. We then saw a midfield five, or with wing backs of Wan-Bissaka and Diouf, which again was expected. The midfield three was comprised of Guido, Ward-Prowse and Paqueta, which I think many, again, surprised that Guido was starting, and then Bowen and Fulkrug up top, as we've seen throughout pre-season. So, yeah, I guess the two standouts there, Guido Rodriguez coming into midfield and Hermansen in goal. What did you make of those calls from Graham Potter early on?
Yeah, I think most of the team picks itself and is kind of self-explanatory in the formation we've seen in pre-season. However, the introduction of Guido was a bit of a surprise. Bearing in mind, you look at Sunderland's team, there's a lot of energy in that midfield. There's a lot of good movement. There's a lot of mobility. And we've gone with two pretty immobile players. They lack the pace to get around. Actually, no, to be fair, immobiles is unfair because they are mobile players. They do have good fitness levels. However, their lack of athleticism and pace does it impact their ability to deal with a team like Sunderland's midfield.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's been a recurring theme throughout the entire pre-season. Whenever we've been talking about it, whether that's in our group chat or whether that's on Hammers Chat Patreon with the videos we do there, we've been saying, that midfield needs an absolute overhaul in there. It's too slow. It's not dynamic enough. And I think we saw that yesterday. We're going to get onto the key moments, but we saw elements of control, but we also saw elements of lack of control. And that's what the difference was in the end. And we saw that with the goals that we conceded, which again, we'll get into. But yeah, I thought bringing in Hermansen was a bold pick from Graham Potter. I didn't necessarily disagree with it. I did agree with it because I don't think Areola's been particularly good. And, if you're signing a number one to come in, then you would expect them to be played regardless of the situation. And they've got Premier League experience already. So I don't think that was the problem. Let's just take a look at the stats overview before we get into the breakdown of the key moments in the game and really analyse what happened for West Ham in those key moments. But when we take a look at the overarching picture, 63% possession for West Ham. So again, we did have large portions of possession, and Sunderland were kind of happy to sit in and use their pace on the counter-attack to create us problems. Expected goals very low from West Ham, 0.56 compared to Sunderland 0.68, which again, I thought theirs would be a little bit higher, to be honest, with the chances they had. 12 shots for West Ham to Sunderland's 10, 5 shots on target for Sunderland to West Ham's 4. Big chances, 2 for Sunderland, 0 for West Ham, and 2 big chances missed for Sunderland, 0 for West Ham as well. Obviously, we had more passes, a couple more fouls committed, and a couple more corners. And you can kind of see from the momentum graph there, it kind of segues us nicely into the analysis of, the first half, by and large, controlled, not too much going on, a couple of moments for both sides. And then the second half was just a lack of control and the game got away from us. But let's go through the key moments. Before we even get into the goals that happened in the second half, that first half and the opening 45 minutes in our first Premier League game back, Mike, what did you make of it? Because we saw an early Bowen chance a couple of minutes in, which was quite encouraging. I thought we were on the front foot. We were pressing quite well. It's quite clear to see we were going quite man-to-man aggressive with our press. So Wan-Bissaka and Diouf were pushing up, and then we had our either left centre-back or right centre-back then pushing in onto their wide players. So it was quite an aggressive setup from Graham Potter. And obviously we did concede a chance in the first half as well. But what did you make of the approach tactically from Graham Potter to this game?
Yeah, I think the feeling was that if you play Guido and if you play Ward-Prowse, that gives you a level of composure and calmness on the ball. They are probably of the midfield ones that we have, bar Potts, the only ones that you would say are really comfortable with the ball at their feet and trying to play with the ball. So he obviously felt that that was an approach that they could potentially keep the game calm and keep us composed and keep us recycling possession, which worked to an effect. But again, it's as we said, there a couple of times where we conceded problems to Sunderland was in transition, because again, that midfield just isn't able to cope with that. And the way that our midfield comprised, it was always incredibly narrow. So it also meant that Sunderland consistently had an out if they went wide, looked at the likes of Andringa. But we did have some good chances. The one in particular where I think it was Ballard essentially cleared the ball off the line for stopping Diouf get a goal. And that was a lovely piece of movement as well.
Completely eradicated that from my memory.
Yeah, no, exactly. But that's the point. There were some moments where you go, it's like a sliding doors thing. If we scored that goal, it probably would have been a different game, because there was a nice bit of link play between Bowen and Fulkirk. I think Bowen plays it into Fulkirk, who then just rolls it back, draws the defenders. It's really smart centre forward play. Ward-Prowse is running through treacle to try and get onto it, and then out of nowhere comes Diouf with a really controlled side foot. It's past the goalkeeper, but it's brilliant defending. Gets in behind his goalkeeper, slides and clears the ball. Essentially, we'll say off the line, but really it was on the 6-yard area. But it would have been a certain goal, and there were the moments where we would have some nice little bits of intricate play, but again, we just also times are too pensive. We're too slow. We're not as incisive as we need to be, and we just lack aggression, I think, as well. And for me personally, I do feel we really struggle with the kind of 3-4-1-2 formation, however you want to frame it. I think we do struggle because it puts us too narrow. So
Agreed.
A very high burden on those fullbacks. And I think if you haven't got a midfield that are able to work in that horizontal and that vertical lines, and to do that consistently across 90 minutes with good energy and good pace throughout, I do think you're almost onto a bit of a loser, because you are putting a huge burden on those fullbacks or those wingbacks really to play as wingers. And I just don't think at the moment we've got necessarily the right players to do that. And also you look at Sunderland's defence, they have huge centre-backs there. And, there's no surprise Fulkirk is not winning any aerial duels against them. And it's even less of a surprise that Bowen is man-marked out and almost physically dominated. It's just par for the course when you're playing in that way. But Sunderland were really resolute, really well, defended really well, very tight. They threw their bodies on the line. It was definitely a team you can tell who were really, really up for the first game of the season. And they outright put their bodies on the line, were very organised and very confident in just that kind of transitions, getting forward, and also put us to the sword in the second half.
Yeah, agreed. I think you're spot on with the formation, and the biggest frustration I have at the moment is we're nullifying our best players, and in particular Jared Bowen. And we don't have many best players anymore, to be honest. So when you're putting someone like Bowen striker up top with Fulkirk, and it just really limits his game. And we're going to get onto the second half in a little bit, but that first half, as you said, we did have a couple of good chances. The Diouf one off the line, the Bowen shot early on. We did concede one, which Hermansen, I thought, made a really good save with as well. But it's just the same story. We were way too passive at times without the ball, and we're just too slow as a team. We're just too slow. And I think that comes from the midfield. There's moments where we play some really nice football in the kind of lower blocks of the pitch between the midfielders. That's what you're going to get from those technical players, which I understand from Graham Potter's perspective was what he wants, to try and get a little bit more control. But there just isn't enough substance. There isn't someone that's going to break the line. There isn't someone that's going to run past a couple of players in that midfield. And then, as you say, there's such a dependence then to go out wide to either Diouf or Wan-Bissaka or Bowen to drift wide. And you're just depending on those players too much. And that's the biggest issue with this. To be honest, I really dislike the way we set up with this back 3-5-2 or whatever you want to call it. It just lacks substance. And if we want to play a 3-5-2 like this, you have to have two strikers that can be those focal points, but we're also running behind and cause issues and link up play, because with the way Bowen plays, that's not his game. he needs to be out wide. He needs to be on the right-hand side. That's where you're going to get the best Jared Bowen. It'd be like putting, Arsenal putting Saka striker. It's just, they wouldn't do it. Yes, we've seen Bowen can do it, but he shouldn't do it. That's not the point. If we need a striker, go and sign a striker to do it, and then let Bowen play on the right. But yeah, I don't like this 5-3-2 at all. I think it needs to change, to be honest, and I really think it lacks dynamism, and we don't have enough dynamic midfielders to play it. And to be honest, I don't think Diouf and Wan-Bissaka are particularly aggressive enough going forwards to play it either. We know Wan-Bissaka can be effective going forwards, and we know Diouf can put good crosses in, but I don't think they're really direct 1-versus-1 wing backs, to be honest. That's not really their game. But yeah, it was an okay first half. Obviously 0-0 at half time. You go into the second half, you're thinking, right, take control of this, show Sunderland, who's been the established Premier League team, get your quality through on the pitch and be clinical in the moments that you create. But it was the complete opposite. I thought in the first half we actually did quite well at quieting the Sunderland fans. I don't think they were too loud because of the control that we had. But second half, we just gave them way too many moments. And yeah, Mike, talk me through this first goal that we conceded around 60 minutes in by Mayanda. Again, literally 30 seconds before this happened, I was in the stand saying, we are walking around the pitch. This is way too passive. We're going to get punished in a minute. And then 30 seconds later, this happens. So yeah, talk me through this.
So we mentioned about our midfield was quite tight and compact. And when you look at this sequence, again, you can see how tight our front two are. We've got Piqueta again, really close to them. On midfield too. So in terms of distances between players, completely fine. However, if you're going to concede space out wide, you usually are going to be doing that to kind of set traps, or you're going to use that byline as an additional defender. But because of the lack of intensity we have when it comes to pressing, it kind of makes that redundant. And by the time the ball goes out, Bowen kind of jogs on over. The fact that the defender is able to advance quite a few yards under no pressure at all, and they've got really only Mayenda in the box, which again it adds to this frustration and the terribleness of the defending. Aguerd can see Mayenda. He makes no attempt to get in front of Mayenda any time. Now, in any case, you want to at least be touch tight in this situation, at least have a hand on them. Or if you're going to give yourself separation, it's going to be so you can get forward and really kind of leap and challenge and put good pressure on. We've said this time and again, Aguerd under a high ball is so frustrating, and it's one of his many weaknesses, in my opinion. And when this ball comes in, you look, we've got Max Kilman in there, we've got Aguerd in there. You would think we're probably fairly safe because at least one of them is going to probably get there to cut the ball out, or at least put enough pressure on Mayenda that it's maybe not going to get as good a contact. The problem is Aguerd is ineffective in the air, essentially, in this situation. And you see, as I made that point, he doesn't try to get in front. Yes, you could argue, there's a player coming in behind. But again, Diouf could have been moving over into position to get into a better place. Kilman has got no fault in this. It's completely over him. He's not going to get it. I have some questions on the footwork for Hermansen. I think he maybe could have moved his feet a bit better, maybe had a little bit better positioning.
Felt like it went in slow motion from when I was watching.
It did. And also when you watch the sequence as well, it just doesn't seem to get across quick enough. And again, I may be being a bit harsh on Hermansen, but it did feel that maybe his footwork weren't as good as it could be to get over and kind of get a hand to it. But look, there's no shirking it. It was a brilliant header by Mayenda. Really well directed. It was a great cross into the box. But our defensive deficiencies certainly made that goal for Sunderland. Yeah. But their quality, so again, because I don't want to diminish what Sunderland did, I don't want to do the quality of the cross and then the quality of the header from Mayenda is what made, which is why they scored the goal. It wasn't just we made individual errors and it was a tap-in. There were collective errors, I think, in how we worked in that situation. But the quality of Sunderland in that situation is why we went 1-0 down.
Exactly. I think that shows as well, again, the lack of urgency. We were in a decent shape, but if you're not going to be urgent and be ready to trigger the press when they get out wide, or, do the hard yards when you need to, it's going to be very easy to play out wide and through West Ham in this system. And as you say, again, we've spoken about him multiple times and how physically he's just not cut out for the Premier League. And in these sorts of games, he's just going to get bullied. And that's all of Sunderland did. They put a really good cross in. But again, the cross shouldn't even come in. It's way too easy. And secondly, Mayenda should not be winning that header. He should not be scoring from that position.
If we had, let's say, for argument's sake, Ballard in that situation in Aguerd's position, the striker's not getting, at a minimum, not getting a clean header, because he would have been aggressive, would have gone in, challenged for the ball. It wouldn't have been a foul. He might have knocked the striker to the ground. But the point is, he would have been aggressive enough to put that pressure on. And that's what we don't have in our defence. We don't have someone who's willing to be essentially domineering. We have good players, but not a domineering centre-back. And that's something we are desperately, desperately missing.
Speaking of Ballard, he wasn't just a defensive rock. He also put Sunderland 2-0 up just 10 minutes after this. Talk me through this, Mike, because again, just really, really weak defending from West Ham.
Yeah, initially it's a really good kind of clearance from Hermansen. I think they whip him across from a set piece, and he punches it out, and he gets to position. Both Fulkrug and Wilson are great. They press up quickly. They press up well, but the issue is, obviously, Wilson has to come over slightly to cover where Ndringa is, just in case, to cover off that pass. Fulkrug kind of half presses, and the player just runs through the middle. No real drop of the shoulder, no feint, just kind of bursts through. And he's able then to then put the ball over to Ndringa, who's on the side. But as you can see, Fulkrug is not even in the picture. Wilson makes the kind of an obligatory kind of move towards the player to kind of, try and cut the pass out, but because he's never anywhere near. And then you've got Todibo, who's now out in the kind of the left wing back position. Again, doesn't really place any pressure. Again, the argument might be that he's anticipating that if the player doesn't put the ball in the box, he might want to go down the line, so he wants to give himself some space, or he might lay it into the player next to him, so he's giving himself an option. But again, that's where I would say Diouf needs to be telling Todibo to go and press, to push in, so because he will cover anything that comes down that line behind him. And he doesn't put any pressure. I think he kind of just half turns his body, the ball's whipped in. And I've obviously highlighted where our three defenders are, but our three defenders are all ahead of the penalty box, penalty spot. So from a position-wise, I would not want my centre-backs to be there. I want my centre-backs to be as close to that 6-yard area, or kind of marking that area as possible, and players rotating.
Yeah, you're either playing an offside or you're dropping a few yards deeper.
And I've highlighted, of course, you've got Bellard at the back there, and you've got him with Paqueta. What frustrates me is where Paqueta is, you can see just in front of him is Souček. Why is Souček not dropping in? Why is he not being told to drop in? Why is Lucas Paqueta not maybe shouting at him to get in because of quite frankly, the complete and utter mismatch between him and Ballard? Souček himself, why is he not spotting that there's a Ballard is at the back as well, and get in there and kind of 2v1 against Ballard there? I don't particularly think it's either of their two's fault. I know some people said, Paqueta should, but it's a complete mismatch, quite frankly. It's just no. And again, the one thing I will say, a bit like with Aguerd, maybe should be anticipating and trying to get himself in front of Ballard, at least to kind of put an extra barrier in there and to try and make it a harder header. But when the ball's whipped in, again, another brilliant cross. And Ndringa, player who only got 1 assist, I think, all of last season, maybe 2 at most. Assist on the first day of the season, puts in a brilliant cross. He goes over the head of Wan-Bissaka. It's, you can see Paqueta does try to get himself ahead and kind of gets himself.
Ballard was always going to win that header, wasn't he?
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's you've got a towering, and I mean towering centre back who's got a good run, and you've got a midfielder who, to be fair, whilst fairly decent in the air, is not going to be able to challenge Ballard. If it was Souček against him, then you may have seen a different result. But the ball's whipped in, and it's a good header. And if we go back to it, just one thing I wanted to pick out was I marked out all of our defenders in this image as well. And you can see they are all to the left-hand side. And we're asking Paqueta, who's meant to be our advanced midfielder, to be the one to defend this. Souček is on the edge. Bowen, he's ahead of Bowen at this point, because that's Bowen in the area as well. So it's just like you're sitting there trying to to understand. Obviously, fair enough. I will say at this point we went to a double pivot with Souček and obviously Paqueta, but it's still the point of why are they not assessing danger enough? I know things happen very quickly on the pitch, but it just feels like things aren't being assessed quickly enough, and players aren't communicating enough as to what they need. If Souček dropped into that spot, that may have been different. Same with the first goal. If we had maybe pressured, we might have forced them down the line, which would have eradicated the chance to put in that cross, or we might have got a block on the cross. I think
with this one, I think it was because obviously there was obviously this was a second phase of play. And that's why players were in bit of different positions. But again, it comes down to the intensity. We were too slow getting out. There was a couple of players, as you say, Fulkirk half did it, Wilson half did it, and then there's gaps, and then we're not set, and then people don't know where to be set because we're not in our shape that we've trained for, and everything's a little bit different outside of what we've trained. And as you say, then you have to try and take accountability in those moments. There has to be communication across that back line. Why on earth is Ballard being left at the back post like that? Either Paqueta needs to scream at his defenders to get across, or he needs to get in front, or as you say, Souček needs to recognise that and drop back in as well. But it was too late.
Saka needs to move himself slightly back.
Exactly. Yeah. It was frustrating. I think at 2-0, I still had a little bit of hope, but to be honest, there was 15, 20 minutes left to go. There was nothing encouraging about the performance. So I was looking at the bench like, who's going to make an impact? We've just brought on Wilson. We're playing 3 up top now with Bowen sort of drifting to the right. There wasn't really any shape to it at all. And it just didn't work. There were times where we had Bowen, Fulkirk and Wilson just playing as a flat 3 up front, just standing still, expecting our midfield or defenders, mainly Todibo, to just drive forwards with the ball and try and give it to either Wan-Bissaka or Juve to make something happen. It just epitomises everything that's wrong or going wrong for West Ham at the moment with this shape and with the players that we have. And I think the third goal was the nail in the coffin. And this really epitomised for me the intensity and the application of this West Ham team. And I think Bowen's quote coming out of pre-season was the spirit of the team. It really helped coming out of pre-season camp in America, that the spirit, the togetherness, the squad is really close together. This doesn't happen if that's true, because it was an absolute shambles of a goal to concede, no matter how late and how much you're chasing the game. So talk me through this third goal from Isidore as we, wrapped up the game.
Yeah, this was the one that frustrated me the most, because I've stopped it at this point, but essentially they clear it. He collects the ball and brings it to this point, and he stops. And I mean, literally stops.
Yeah.
And we have Wan-Bissaka, Irvin, and then we also have Souček to the left there, who then comes in to kind of get close to him. And obviously I highlight Isidore and the space that he then moves into. At this point, he stops and waits for about 4 to 5 seconds, and no one tries to put a foot in. No one tries to pressure. They all just stand off, kind of thinking they're closing off angles. But there's not, again, this is the point. You're losing the game. It's 2-0 in the 90th minute or 91st minute. One goal can change the whole complexion. No one's going, I'm just going to get into him. I'm going to get into him. I'm going to try and win the ball. If I don't win it, fine. But I'm going to try and make something happen out of this defensive situation to try and turn it over. But we don't. We literally give him 4 to 5 seconds on the ball, and he's able to play the ball nicely into Isidore, who is running into space. And obviously, Juve is almost on his own at this stage, but it's just the fact that we allow that much time, and we know it's the Premier League. You can't allow players any time whatsoever, and we do. And Isidore is then able to just bring the ball, up the pitch. Yes, we get players back. Players show urgency. Again, look where Paqueta is. Paqueta is the deepest player of our team here in this situation. Isidore gets ball, brings it onto the edge of the area. Again, Juve doesn't try and show him down the line. You can see he's already shaping for that right-hand foot. He doesn't try to move into him to try and force him to then cut back into his left and take it down the line. He just allows him to kind of cut into that side. And obviously I made the highlight because this is essentially where his shot is. But it's a good shot in some ways because it goes. Only reason I'm saying it's a good shot is because it goes in. But really, it's tame. It has a little bit of lift on it. It hits, bounces just after the goalkeeper's hand, quite frankly, and then goes in. And the reason I say after the hand, because just when you see this screenshot, how on earth can you say that this was about to go in? The goalkeeper's in such a good position.
He's not even looking at the ball.
He's ready to palm it, and he just completely and utterly misjudges it. And this is the kind of thing that Leicester fans were on about, that he can have an absolute barnstormer, save so many shots, and then he'll just have a moment where you're like, how have we let that in? And it was that. The third goal is an absolute howler from in every single level. The lack of pressure, the just allowing a player 4 to 5 seconds on the ball without even making a movement towards them. Then the fact that Isidore is able to just carry the ball so far, again, with no pressure, is allowed to cut in on the foot that he wants. We constantly have allowed an attacking team to dictate what they do. At no point have we tried to assert ourselves in which to force them into something that they did not want to do as a player. Yeah. And as a result, we've conceded 3 goals that were arguably preventable. Again, fair play to Sunderland. They put us to the sword. I'm not playing down what they did on the day, because, again, they were brilliantly defensively resolute, closed off all angles. They made it difficult for us to get any real clear shots or chances on goal or at goal. And when they had opportunities, they took them. And, the last one was just a howler from the goalkeeper on his debut. Just was the icing on the cherry of the cake.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was that day in that game?
100%. I mean, it was at that point I walked out, to be honest. I'd had enough. It was just such a poor goal to concede. And as you say, looking back on that with Hermansen, like how he hasn't saved that, I don't know. But again, to be honest, the defending and the application and the intensity and the work to try and get back and stop that from happening, we gave up. That's as simple as it is. We gave up. Players stood still. Players stopped tracking back, and we allowed the goal to happen way too easily. And that was the story of, to be honest, the second half for West Ham. And full credit to Sunderland, thoroughly deserved it. West Ham are going to be in very big trouble this season if we don't bring in, not even just bring in, but change the way we play, because it's not good enough. We could still sign a couple of really good centre midfielders. It doesn't change the fact that we're playing Bowen striker. It doesn't change the fact that if we do move away from a 2 up top and go to a 1 up top, then we've only got Fulkirk and Wilson as our options. And, just a note on Fulkirk, I thought he was really, really poor yesterday. I think he had 9 ground duels. He won 0 of them. 0 out of 9 ground duels won, which is absolutely shocking for a striker that's meant to be your focal point. And, I thought he was really, really poor. There were other players that were equally as poor. I actually thought it was one of Tadebo's more encouraging performances, especially in the first half. I thought his reading of the game was fantastic. But again, the same weaknesses are cropping up. Our midfield's too slow. We're too passive. We're too lethargic. The centre-backs aren't strong enough. Your centre-backs aren't organised enough. We're not disciplined enough. We're not showing the intensity or application we need to. I think so far, before the Sunday games, recording this, we had the second lowest distance covered out of any team in the Premier League this weekend, which again epitomises the work rate and how we play under Graham Potter and the passive nature out of possession. So, yeah, it was a frustrating day. What are your final thoughts, Mike, before we move on from this defeat? We're not bottom anymore because Wolves lost 4-0. So, positives. But yeah, that Chelsea game next week, how are you feeling going into that after the back of this 3-0 defeat?
For me, I think if we're going to play with a 3, we have to go to a 3-4-3. I've said all summer that I desperately believe we need a starting left winger. I've been told at times, no, we don't need that. We're going to play this 2 up top. I don't care. We need variations. You need to change things. We need a starting left winger, quite frankly. We may not play it every game, but we need to have that variation for certain teams that we play. The midfield has to change. It cannot remain as it is. Even putting Freddie Potts in there, I think, will be a big change for us, in the sense that he is, I feel, far more, I guess, adventurous and a bit more kind of optimistic in what he tries to do.
Yeah.
And he also has legs and willing to get round and will put his foot in. He's young. He will get exploited. I can concede that, and I will be willing to accept that if he went into our midfield. But I think that we need an outright dynamic defensive midfielder, I think if the rumours we went for Santos are true, then that's the right type of player. There are other ones at a much cheaper level, like Frendrup, for example, who is brilliant in that vertical, does have some box-to-box elements, but could do that. Again, centre midfield, we need a box-to-box player. We need someone who can get the ball, drive with it, can link play, is able to break lines either through drives with the ball at his feet and carrying, or fibre passing between those lines. And then again, there are players out there, but we just need to. And one of those would be an example is obviously Fernandes. The board need to do their job, quite frankly. That Karen Brady's gone on and mouthed off today saying, "Oh, they're not going to sell, and we just can't go out and buy the players that Graham Potter doesn't want." We're not asking you to sign the players. Go buy the players he does want. Stop dicking around offering players he doesn't want because it fits within this stupid budget you've got. If we're looking at players at 40, 50 million quid who are valued at that, that's because you've given them a budget that is in line with that. They're not just arbitrarily going to say, "Oh, these are the players we want," and "Oh, it's outside of our budget, but let's have a crack anyway." They're not stupid. Look at what they've done at Brighton. These people are clearly not stupid. If you give them a budget, they'll work within it. Now, if they're trying to sign these other players, that's because you've given them a budget and now you're not willing or able to support that budget because you made promises or made statements that you cannot back up now. And we have to now make a commitment to Graham Potter, or just bin it all off. Just be honest with us. Yeah, we're not going to do this thingy model because, quite frankly, we don't see the value in it. They want players that are far more expensive than we can afford, and the ones they do bring us forward that are maybe less than the other players, we don't trust it because we want to go in this model. Be honest with us. Stop mugging us off. Be honest so we can accept what comes this season. But we started off in a negative way this season because, again, what we've seen in the transfer window, and then that complete mishandling of not sorting out the most painful area of our team has shown chickens come to roost. And if we don't fix it by Chelsea, we are going to be in line for another spanking. So
agreed.
It's how it's going to be if we don't address it and we don't address the urgency levels.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens between now and the Chelsea game. I know we're playing them on Friday, so it gives us a little bit less time to get any players through the door if we do want to make that happen. But yeah, really, really disappointing defeat and opening start to the Premier League for West Ham. Full credit to Sunderland and their fans. They were all very nice to us when we went up there as well. So fair play to them. Good luck for the rest of the season. And yeah, hopefully we can turn it around. Still 37 games left to play. But yeah, as you say, big changes needed for West Ham. yeah, exactly. 1 week closer to the end of the season for West Ham fans. But yeah, hopefully we can turn it around. If you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'm going to try this, see if this works. There we go. Like, subscribe, all of that jazz. And yeah, we'll be back with our preview later this week for the Chelsea game. And yeah, hopefully maybe a couple of signings to break down as well. But yeah, leave your comments down below what you thought of the game, the 3-0 defeat to Sunderland, and what are your biggest concerns going into that Chelsea game next week. But yeah, Mike, till the next one.
Yeah, come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.